Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Gamescript. I'm going to be looking at the San Francisco 49ers versus the Detroit Lions in this show. And the 49ers have been pretty exploitable in their defense recently. They haven't been as scary as they have in the past, but can Jared Goff exploit that? We'll dig into it after this. Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heatseeker Sports, and you're watching Gamescript. On today's episode, I am looking at the San Francisco 49ers versus the Detroit Lions. We're looking at a 51.5 point total with San Francisco as 7.5 point favorites in this one. And this is going to be an interesting game because both these offenses have, pretty good weapons on them, and they're pretty high-powered offenses, and their defenses, as far as the Detroit side, they have not been very good this season. On the San Francisco side, they're perceived as being a very good defense, but they do have some weak spots that Detroit could potentially exploit, but it's all going to depend on how Jared Goff is able to perform against them, given his propensity to perform against the pressure situations. So I'll dig into that in a second. Before I do that, make sure to hit the like button. Looking for 15 likes to put out a shorter video a little bit closer to lock. Make sure to hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I'm at 450 subscribers. I'm looking for 500 by the end of the season. We only got 50 more to go, so help me out there. And make sure to check out the other episode of Gamescript that I dropped for the Kansas City versus Baltimore game. I shot that with Spread earlier today. That's already up on the YouTube page. I'll be putting out a 2-game slate show in a little bit as well. Probably do that at some point on Saturday. So you're going to want to subscribe to the YouTube channel to make sure you're getting those alerts. And then also make sure to sign up for an Underdog account using the promo code SEEK, S-E-E-K. If you do that, they're going to match you up to $100 on your first deposit. I'll get a Underdog show in here too before the games start and show you guys an opportunity to, draft a team that could win you some money this weekend in the championship weekend and give you some interest if you're not interested in doing showdown slates and stuff like that, or 2-game slates. So gives you an alternative, and it's a fun game to play, and Underdog in general is a great platform to play on. So definitely subscribe or sign up for an Underdog account using the promo code SEEK. They'll match you up to $100 on your first deposit, and I definitely appreciate you using that promo code. So let's get into this game and take a look at what we have as far as a player pool. Christian McCaffrey is going to have a tough matchup this week, and Detroit has been basically since week 12, they've been lights out as far as their run defense. They're only allowing 15.8 DraftKings points a game to running backs. They're good against the run, and they're good against pass catching backs as well. So very, very difficult matchup for Christian McCaffrey this week. And as we can see, he is at 12.6 in the flex and 18.9 in the captain. He'll probably be the highest owned captain, but we can probably avoid him in the captain this week because there's going to be better options where we can get a little bit different from the field and potentially, set ourselves up pretty good to have the rest of our lineups more balanced and just better general lineups by not using McCaffrey in the captain. Amon-Ra St Brown has a difficult matchup as well. As you can see, recently he's been really good. He's scored 20-plus DraftKings points every week since week 15, basically. And before that, he's just been lights out all season. But with Amon-Ra, the problem with his matchup this week is San Francisco is really good in the middle of the field, and they're really good against slot receivers. They're only allowing 12.6 DraftKings points a game to the slot, and they are going to be not the best matchup for Amon-Ra this week. And Amon-Ra might not be such a great guy to have in the captain this week. So we'll dig into good captain options here in a minute. Brock Purdy is in a good matchup this week. Detroit has not been good against quarterbacks recently. Brock Purdy, everybody's off the Brock Purdy wagon after last week. He had some difficulty playing in the rain. If you've seen him before playing in the rain, he's not very good at playing in the rain. And there's a few game sample size of that, including the Cleveland game that he played earlier in the season. He only had 8.7 DraftKings points in that one. Last week, he only put up 15 DraftKings points in the Green Bay game, but they still won the game. But Brock Purdy, a little bit of recency bias maybe affecting him in this slate, and hopefully we get a reduction in ownership. As far as the 2-game slate, it looks like he's pretty high owned, but I don't have any numbers yet for the showdown slate on this game. But I'll try and dig some of those up and get a better idea of what Brock Purdy is looking like. I'm going to go check out the Roto Grinders situation and see what we're looking at for Brock Purdy. I'll check him out in the flex position. Looking at about 49%. So he's about 50% projected ownership. So, take that for what you will on whether or not you want to have exposure to Brock Purdy. I like his matchup. San Francisco matchup against Detroit. Detroit is giving up 23 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. And, Detroit has basically been a pass funnel defense for most of the season, and especially since week 12. So Brock Purdy is definitely in play this week, and I like him probably better than Jared Goff. Jared Goff is in a rough spot this week. Jared Goff does not do well versus pressure. And I'm going to read some pressure stats for you real quick that we have in this game. Jared Goff has a 44% completion percentage against pressure situations. And the San Francisco 49ers pressure at 31% of their dropbacks. So that's a pretty high rate. That's bad for Jared Goff, and that is not good for his matchup, on top of him leaning more towards the middle of the field. If you read Rich Rebar's article, he puts out a whole bunch of stuff about Jared Goff not being very good in the middle of the field. I recommend you check that out. Warren Sharp also talked about it on his appearance on Sports Grid this week. So check that out as well. But Jared Goff does not do well when he's pressured, and his highest success rate is, again, passing to the middle of the field. And that is going to be a rough matchup for Jared Goff this week against San Francisco because they're more vulnerable out wide. So we're going to have to consider Jared Goff in our lineups this week. I don't like him at this price in our lineups this week. And the flex, he is 9,600. That's pretty expensive for a guy who looks like he might struggle in this one. But as I mentioned before, the 49ers defense is not too much to fear. They're about a middling matchup against the quarterback position, allowing 18 DraftKings points a game since week 12. But, I don't know if that's going to get Jared Goff into an optimal lineup this week, given the high upside of some of these other expensive guys. So let's take a look and see what we have next. We got Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel has been ruled in this week. He has no injury designation going into this game. There were some fears that he had a shoulder injury, and he got pulled from the 49ers game pretty early. Didn't come back into it. And so there was fear that he would not play this week, but looks like those fears have been alleviated as he has no injury designation and should play. Now, whether he is going to be a decoy or something like that remains to be seen. But Deebo Samuel, as of right now, is looking good to go for Sunday. And he has a matchup against CJ Gardner-Johnson, a rivalry there, where Gardner-Johnson has been talking a whole bunch of smack on Deebo and just lighting the fire there. So Maybe Debo comes in and he takes out Gardner Johnson, just works to neutralize that secondary weapon of the Lions and sets things up for his teammates like Ayuk and George Kittle this week. Samuel, on top of that, we got Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Now, if you watched the show last week, there was a stat that I was talking about with the San Francisco 49ers being much more vulnerable against outside zone running backs like Aaron Jones. And I think that Jahmyr Gibbs follows most closely in that archetype for a running back. And Jahmyr Gibbs, I have some interest in Jahmyr Gibbs for sure this week. He's at 8,800, and he's going to make an interesting play this week. He's, that's pretty cheap price for Jahmyr Gibbs, and he's the first guy that like I really, that I like, given the matchups and given the injury situations. Ayuk is another guy that I like. I like him because as I mentioned, Detroit Lions are giving up 19.9 DraftKings points a game out wide. Detroit Lions are also giving up 25.6 DraftKings points a game to the slot. Brandon Ayuk, he of course runs looks like about 80% of his routes out wide. So he is going to be set up for a decent game against the Detroit Lions this week. So Brandon Ayuk, he has had a couple slow weeks in a row. He did not play the whole game in week 18, but in the divisional round, he only had 6.2 DraftKings points against Green Bay. Before that, he had 27 against Washington, 20 against Baltimore. He's been, up and down for the most part of the season, but it's the nature of that offense. And I think that Ayuk is set up to have probably the best game on San Francisco this week. So I like Ayuk, and I like him as a captain option this week. We got Sam LaPorta. We got a Spider-Man meme situation with the defenses of Detroit and San Francisco since week 12 as far as the DraftKings points a game that they are allowing. They are each allowing 14 DraftKings points a game to opposing tight ends. So those are very good matchups for both teams. George Kittle and Sam LaPorta both going to be in play. You can see Sam LaPorta, he's basically Jared Goff's second most targeted receiver pretty much. So 11 targets last week, 3 the week before that, 7 the week before that, 12 the week before that. I wouldn't be surprised to see Goff leaning on LaPorta a little bit, especially with the 49ers' ability to shut down slot receivers. They have a 12.6 DraftKings points allowed per game from San Francisco's defense against the slot, and that is a very low number. So not a very good matchup for Amon-Ra. Maybe they lean a little bit more on LaPorta this week in that situation. So let's take a look at George Kittle. George Kittle in that same basically identical situation, except I think Kittle probably has a little bit easier matchup because Detroit's secondary is just bad all around. And we can see with Kittle, 18 DraftKings points last week with Samuel out. If Samuel is hurt or if he's limited in any capacity, a strategy might be to put Kittle and Ayuk in your lineups along with Brock Purdy instead of relying on Deebo Samuel, who might be a decoy of some sort, and B, he might just be focused on taking Gardner Johnson out of the game a little bit. So let's look at David Montgomery. David Montgomery, I don't like his matchup as much as Jahmyr Gibbs. He runs less of his runs to the outside, but he is pretty efficient when he does do that. But I don't like him as much as Gibbs in this lineup. But he's at 5,600, so he won't hurt you if you need to go cheaper for a running back exposure on the Lions this week. Jennings, not too interested in Jennings with Deebo in the game. He has his big games when Deebo is out or if a guy is injured. He had 6 targets when Deebo was out last week. I don't think that Jennings will have as much usage in this game. I think it's going to stick to, instead of passing to Juwan Jennings in the slot, they'll probably focus on Kittle, Samuel, and Christian McCaffrey in those short middle of the field situations. Badgley is the kicker for Detroit, and he has not done a whole lot with them. It's been a weird situation with kickers for Detroit this season. They had Patterson, I believe, was their kicker in the beginning of the season, or it might have been Badgley in the beginning of the season. They cut him, brought in Patterson, and they ended up cutting Patterson and bringing Badgley back. But he hasn't been bad since he got back. Looks like he's missed a couple extra points, but he has not been relied on very much. They haven't had him over 10 DraftKings points yet, so maybe they don't have a lot of confidence in him. As far as Moody, he's a rookie. He's blown it on a couple occasions this season. You saw him miss a field goal last week. He missed a field goal the previous week. And, just 2 weeks in a row missing field goals for a rookie kicker is not a good thing. He had that game versus Cleveland where he missed 2. He missed 1 versus Minnesota. I don't think that Shanahan is necessarily going to lean on this guy in high-pressure situations. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see them go for it a little bit more or be a little bit more risky with trying to avoid getting Jake Moody in this game in important situations. As far as Josh Reynolds is a guy that, I kind of like Reynolds this week with the situation that Amon-Ra is facing with the difficulty in the middle of the field. Reynolds runs out wide. 49ers are good at guarding deep passes, but not wideouts in general. And that is where Reynolds might be interesting. And we've seen him pop up in situations in the past. He had 7 targets versus the Rams, 7 versus Minnesota. He's shown some upside throughout the season, and he's not that expensive at $4,400. And if we need to get some passing game exposure on the Lions side without having to force in Amon-Ra or something like that, then Reynolds is going to be interesting this week. 49ers D is going to be interesting with Jared Goff's ability against the middle of the field, but also playing on the road. I think the pressure is going to be a lot for Jared Goff this week. And on top of that, the noise that he's going to have to contend with and everything like that, it might not be a good spot for Jared Goff, and he might make some mistakes, which makes the 49ers defense interesting. As far as Jameson Williams, he is cheap. He's $3,800. I don't know how much I like him this week. I'm getting a little bit tired of him not doing anything, but I said the same thing about Jahmyr earlier in the season, and the same week Jahmyr Gibbs ended up going off. So, we have yet to see a breakout game from Jameson Williams, but, this could easily be it with the 49ers being weaker against wideouts. But, the types of targets that Jameson Williams gets are not really what San Francisco is allowing this season. So, maybe lean a little bit more towards Reynolds than Williams this week. Lions D, Brock Purdy, he's shown some weakness. I don't know if the Detroit Lions are going to be much of a defense to fear for Purdy, though, because of all the situation that they're giving up as far as DraftKings points, giving up 23 DraftKings points a game to quarterbacks. Detroit is giving up 19.9 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. They're giving up 25.6 DraftKings points a game to slots and 13.8 DraftKings points a game to tight end. The only position that they've been good against has been the run, where they're only giving up 15.8 DraftKings points. So I expect Purdy to be, heavily used in this game. And I don't know that the defense is going to be able to put up points against him. We'll take a look at Brock Purdy versus pressure, get an idea of how Purdy is doing versus pressure. The Lions are pressuring at 35% rate, And Purdy has a pretty high completion percentage against pressure. He's got a 56% completion percentage. So he is not hurt much by pressure. He's thrown 7 touchdowns to 4 interceptions against pressure, not including what he did last week. And, the opposition is blitzing at a 35% rate, and he has a 70% completion percentage against the blitz. So just everything that you can throw at Purdy, like he generally does pretty well against. And a lot of that has to do with, those short passes and intermediate passes to guys who can get a ton of yards after contact. So I don't like the Lions as much as the 49ers defense in this one. But if you're building Lions builds, then they make sense because Purdy's not, he's not invulnerable to defenses having big games, as we've seen a few times this year. Elijah Mitchell, don't like the running game in general versus Detroit, so I don't like Mitchell this week. I'd rather go with Christian McCaffrey if I'm going to take a stab on the run game this week. Let's see, taking a look even further. Not interested in Ray McCloud. He hasn't really done too much on top of. We look like we're having all our main receivers in this week. Use check. Not really interested there. So other than that, I don't really see anyone worth dumpster diving for. Take a quick look at that again. So we can go ahead and start building a lineup. Going to go with Brandon Ayuk. He's probably my favorite captain this week. Going to go ahead and put Brandon Ayuk in there. Going to stack him with Purdy. I'm going to stack them with Gibbs. And I'm going to go ahead and put LaPorta in there as well. And then we're left with 5,600 per guy. Going to go with, can't get McCaffrey in that lineup. So if we're in this situation, we're looking like we're going to fade McCaffrey. So I want to get another receiver for Purdy. And I think that receiver is going to be Kittle for me. That's going to leave us with 4,500. That leaves us with Reynolds. That leaves us with 49ers D. I think that this lineup lends itself more to 49ers D or Jameson Williams or Josh Reynolds. Maybe Reynolds would be the safest bet. I don't know what the distribution is going to be as far as how many players on each team are going to be the popular builds. Let's take a look real quick. I'll put in 150 lineups and see what the optimizer is going to try to tell me. Stand by on that. In the meantime, hit that like button. Get me up to 15 likes to put out a shorter video, a little bit closer to lock. Make sure to hit subscribe on the YouTube page. Looking to get about 500 YouTube subscribers before the end of the season. We got a couple weeks left with conference championships, and then the Super Bowl. So make sure to get me that extra 50 subscribers. Been on a good pace, getting about 30 a week. So I think we can definitely hit that number. As far as the team stacks, looks like San Francisco, 4 players, is going to be 47% owned, according to this optimizer. At least that's what the optimizer is trying to get me. So assume that maybe San Francisco is going to be the heavyweight to build, and Detroit is going to be the less popular direction. So if you want to get different, then you're probably going to want to build for Detroit lineups. With this build here, I've left you in a situation where you can rotate out Josh Reynolds, the 49ers D, Jameson Williams, Lions D if you wanted to. It wouldn't make sense in that lineup, but those are some options. If you wanted to go a little bit different, if you're uncomfortable with fading McCaffrey, maybe we get rid of LaPorta. Let's put still can't put McCaffrey in there. That's how expensive McCaffrey is. Like, you're going to really, really hinder your lineup if you're using McCaffrey this week. So let's put McCaffrey in there. Leaves us with 7,700. Yeah. At best, you can get LaPorta in there and then, dumpster dive. If we wanted to go a little bit different here, if we wanted to go with a Detroit guy, let's say that, we want to go with let's go with Gibbs in the captain or LaPorta. I'll shoot for Gibbs. Well, Gibbs is more expensive than Ayuk, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's put LaPorta in the captain. And let's go with Gibbs. Let's give him Gibbs. Let's give us McCaffrey. Let's go with Ayuk. We're not going to be able to get a quarterback in this build either. So, yeah, I think McCaffrey is going to be a hindrance this week, and we're going to need a lot of points out of him in order to make it worth his salary. Of course, in a situation like this, McCaffrey can easily put up those points that we need for him. But at the same time, he could also be hindering us from, if this game shoots out, from getting exposure to these other, good players. And if McCaffrey doesn't have a monster game against a very tough, very stout Detroit run defense, then that'll set us up for a bad spot. I think I definitely prefer that direction where I'm going the passing game. But let's try to build one with McCaffrey in here regardless. So we're left with about 4,700 per guy. We got McCaffrey, Ayuk, and Gibbs and LaPorta. So let's go down here a little bit and get, let's say, the 49ers D in there. That's going to leave us with ability to get one of the kickers in there. Juwan Jennings, if you want him. Reynolds would be an option. Williams is an option. All those guys are options. We got no quarterback exposure in this game. So if you think that both these quarterbacks are going to be unsuccessful, then, that would make sense. If we want to switch it up and put Gibbs in the captain instead of LaPorta, that leaves us with 4,400. At that point, we got Reynolds. We lose the kickers. We got Reynolds and Williams, though. So we're getting a lot of passing game exposure in this build with no quarterback. So I don't like that a whole lot. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So let's see. Well, I guess we don't have a lot of passing on the San Francisco side, just on the Detroit side. But we've got Gibbs and LaPorta. I think it does make a little bit of sense to, maybe go with a Reynolds too in that situation and just hope that they're racking up PPR points and Gibbs is rushing in touchdowns instead of Jared Goff passing them. So that'll keep both the quarterbacks out of a build like that, but also give us, like a pretty balanced build. We got Gibbs, we got LaPorta, we got McCaffrey, we got Ayuk, we got San Francisco 49ers defense, and then we would have Jameson Williams or Josh Reynolds on top of it. So sets us up with a decent situation, at least. Not horrible. If you want to go with McCaffrey in the captain, I think you need to play the San Francisco defense with that. I think you need to go as far as your run back. You're going to have to look to go cheap. Maybe Gibbs is the run back option there. Gibbs, or let's go with LaPorta. Gibbs just competing with touches, and then he's got to run a very specific type of run in order to be successful against San Francisco. So let's get LaPorta in there. And then for the 49ers side, let's get Ayuk in there again. So we got Ayuk and McCaffrey and the 49ers D, left with 5,600 per guy. So let's go with let's try to put Gibbs in there too. That leaves us with 2,500. In that situation, you got Eli Mitchell, who I don't like in this game. So let's get Gibbs out of there. Let's go with Montgomery in this build. And that leaves us with at least with 5,700. So if you use Montgomery over Gibbs, one thing that Rich Rebar mentioned in his article this week is that Gibbs is more used in those outside zone runs than Montgomery, but Montgomery is more efficient in them. So you could tell yourself that story if you wanted to use Montgomery. I think it's going to be a situation where San Francisco is playing with a pretty significant lead, and that it's going to be tough to get Montgomery into those game scripts. But if you wanted to go there, like that's an option that would at least leave you open for playing guys like the kickers, Reynolds, Williams, Lions. I think that's the range that you want to be in there for your last guy. I don't think you want to go below that. I don't really see anyone that I like too much, unless you want to, even if you want to take a stab with Kyle Juszczyk, he's 8K. So that's not horrible. Chris Conley, I think I saw him targeted for the first time, it seemed, last week. He got 6 targets in week 18. So, that's a direction that you could go. I like the original direction the most, though, where we have Ayuk in that captain spot. I have Purdy in there with him. That way I get some quarterback exposure. And then I have Gibbs, LaPorta, Kittle, and I'm left in the situation where I can pick from one of these guys. I think that's my favorite probably route to go. We're rolling the dice, fading McCaffrey in that build, but we do have a lot of high upside guys in it regardless. So we have a lot of potential with this build. McCaffrey's going to be in a tough matchup. McCaffrey also is going to be highly owned. If we're looking at the projected captain ownership, according to RotoGrinders, I see McCaffrey projected at 20% ownership. That's going to be the highest on the slate in the captain spot. So you can imagine what his overall ownership is going to be. And if you're fading that, I mean, that's going to set you apart from 80% of the field. You're going to be competing with 20% instead of 80%. And if McCaffrey busts, which is entirely possible in a game like this, let's see. He had 13 DraftKings points in week 17 versus Washington. He had 14 versus Cleveland. He had 14.8 versus Dallas. Cleveland is a tough defense. So, he does have the possibility of putting up, 13, 14 DraftKings points. So, I mean, that's a way that you can go if you want to get different. Just if you're building a few lineups, maybe put him in 1 of 5 or something like that. But McCaffrey is very expensive. He's going to be very limiting when you use him this week, and he doesn't have the best matchup. So just keep that in mind when you're building lineups. And other than that, make sure to hit like on the video. Get me to 15 likes to put out a shorter video later on. Subscribe to the YouTube page. As I mentioned, I'm about 50 short of 500. I'm at 450 right now. And then make sure to catch those other shows that I put up a Gamescript with Spread Astaire, where we cover the Kansas City-Baltimore game. Going to put out a 2-game slate later on this weekend. And on top of that, sign up for Underdog using the promo code SEEK. They're going to match you up to $100 on your first deposit for a new account. And use the promo code SEEK. You got to take out their default code and put in SEEK, as I have on the bottom of the screen there. And make sure to do that. And I will catch you guys this weekend. Thank you.